this story happened in Mexico, and it actually happened to my uncle. They found my uncle dead in like the woods.
Oh, okay.
What happened was is that he used to get drunk a lot. He would always go with my other uncles and stuff. They would walk from like spot to spot or whatever, right? They were saying that they literally saw a beautiful woman, telling them to follow her. Well, like spooked them out as they literally saw that she was floating, so they dipped. So this one time I think he went by himself to go drink, to go do what he regularly does, but he never came back home. So they went looking for him, and then they said that they found him like out in the campo type shit, like just laying on the floor.
He had no injuries on him?
Nah, nothing, bro, nothing. They
the
said that he died from regular causes, but why would he be just laying there on the floor? And they're saying that maybe he saw it again, but this time he actually followed her.
This is your chance to leave now, because what I'm about to tell you is some next level stuff. You've been warned, and if you're still here, it's story time. Take a seat. So yeah, there's this thing called P90X. It works. This disgusting man behind me is Kevin Davis, and he is evil personified. And even though he's not a serial killer, I'm still going to put him on this list because the nature of his crime is absolutely horrifying. That lovely woman next to him was his mother, whom he killed. And that's not even the worst part. Let me tell you what happened and how it happened. On the morning of March 27th, 2014, Davis would go to his mother and tell her that he did not like people and wished to end himself. The victim, Kimberly Hill, seen here, would go on to tell Davis that if that's what he wanted to do, she couldn't stop him. Hearing that come out of his mother's mouth would infuriate Kevin, so what does he do? He would come up behind her and try to strangle her with a cord. Hill began screaming, so this made Kevin panic. So he goes and retrieves a hammer and starts to bash in his mother's skull. He hit her at least 20 times, causing her skull to split open. Davis then went and retrieved a kitchen knife where he inserted it into the wound on his mother's head. He said to ensure she was dead, he took the knife and stirred her brain with it. And get this, after he removed the knife, he would then stick his own hand into his mother's head wound and then start feeling around, saying that her brain felt like putty. And then after that was over, he tasted some of it. Oh my gosh. He then proceeded to drag the body into the master bedroom where he assaulted it. He had also planned to do something similar to his sister, but thankfully he decided against it. After he was done performing that disgusting act, he calmly went over to a neighbor's house and said that he needed help because he killed someone. The police would arrest Davis without incident, where he made a full confession to all of his crimes. Kevin would even go on to tell police that he had often fantasized about having relations with dead bodies. With a smirk on his face, Kevin would explain to detectives how he was a virgin before he assaulted his mother's corpse. He would be gently laughing as he said, "I guess I lost my virginity to a corpse." And the most heartbreaking part is that Kevin would go on to say that Kimberly, his mother, was a great mom and she didn't deserve what he had done to her. In fact, he would go on to say that she was the best mother in the world and that he was just a terrible, disgusting person. At least we agree on something. Kevin would smile at the jury as they sentenced him to life in prison. He currently serves his time at the Jester IV facility in Richmond, Texas, and get this, is eligible for parole in March of 2044. Good riddance, Kevin, you human dumpster.
You've heard of the Charlie game, right? Well, if you haven't, it's like Bloody Mary, but way, way worse. With Bloody Mary, you turn off all the lights, you turn the water on or something, and then you say Bloody Mary's name 3 times. Then your friend would grab you, you'd run out of the bathroom screaming, and it was all fun and games because you got scared, right? It's scary, but it's okay because we all know it's a game, right? But what about when it's not just a game? I can't believe I'm doing this makeup look, but you guys asked for this. You guys wanted Bejeweled Shrek, so here it is. Anyways, me and my friends were hanging out in the basement. We were eating pizza and playing the Nintendo Switch. Then Jonah looked to me and asked, "Do you know the Charlie game?" At first I thought he was talking about a new game on the Switch or something. He told me you go into the bathroom and you turn off the lights. Then you knock on the mirror and you look for Charlie. If you see him, the game is over. If you don't see him, then it's time to go to step 2. The second part of the game was too hard to explain, so we decided he was just going to show us. He took a piece of paper and he wrote yes and no on it in 4 corners, like this. Then he put 2 pencils crossing each other on the paper and started chanting, "Charlie, Charlie, can you hear me?" He turns the light off, and at this point, I'm starting to get scared. I whispered to my friend Christina that I was scared. She leaned over and assured me that it's just a game. We were whispering, but somehow Jonah heard me. Jonah looks up at us and he goes, "It's not just a game." We asked Charlie questions and the pencils moved and he answered. But that's not the scary part. So after we finished the game, we went to bed. Everyone else had fallen asleep and I was watching TikTok on my phone. I heard a creak and it sounded like it was coming from upstairs. I tried to tell myself maybe it was the wind or the house settling or their pets, but it wasn't windy and they don't have any pets, so when I heard the creak a second time, I got scared. I tried to wake Christina, but she was out. That's when I noticed that Jonah wasn't laying next to us. I'm debating whether or not to get up when I start hearing whispering. And then it hits me, he's playing that freaking game again. That's when I had an idea. I was gonna scare him. So I sneaked closer to the bathroom and sure enough, the whispers are getting louder. I could hear his chanting, "Charlie, Charlie, can you hear me? Charlie, Charlie, show your face." When I got up to the door, it was closed. There was a weird light coming from underneath the door. I reached for the door handle and when I touched it, it was burning hot. I kept reminding myself that it was just a game. I knew when I opened that door, I was gonna see Charlie. I just went for it. I opened the door. And we're finished with Bedazzled Shrek, so go to part 2. Let me know what look I should do for part 2.
These are some of the scariest last words ever said by serial killers. And I found all these on Reddit. Number 1 is Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer is one of the most notorious serial killers of all time, and he ate a lot of people. And his last words were, "I don't care if I live or if I die, so go ahead and kill me." Number 2 is Peter Kürten, aka the Vampire of Dusseldorf. Peter was on death row for killing over 60 people and drinking some of their blood. And his last words were, "Tell me, after my head's been chopped off, would I be able to hear the blood gushing out of my head?" Number 3, John Avalos Alba. John was on death row for fatally shooting his wife while he was on probation. And his last words were, "Okay, warden, let's do it. I love y'all. I can taste it already. I'm starting to go." Next up, we have Jimmy Glass. Jimmy was on death row after he escaped prison and went on to kill 2 people. And his last words were, "I'd rather be fishing." And finally, we have Eileen Wuornos. Eileen was on death row for killing 7 men between 1989 and 1990. And her last words were, "I'd like to say I'll be sailing with The Rock, and I'll be back on Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th, just like the movie, big mothership and all. I'll be back." Hearing all of this was haunting, but that's why
This is why they started putting bells on grave sites. Being buried alive is probably one of the most terrifying things that could ever happen to you, and it actually happened a lot more than you think. One of the most infamous cases was of a woman who was buried alive not once, but twice. A woman named Alice drank a drink that contained poppy seed that put her into such a sedated state that the doctors pronounced her dead and quickly buried her. But a few days after they buried her, some children were playing above her gravesite, kind of weird, but okay, and they heard groans and screams coming from inside her grave. She had been fighting and clawing and doing everything she could to try to get out of her coffin, fighting with her literal life. A day later, they finally got in and got her body out, but she was so bloody and so bruised that she seemed like she was on the brink of death and didn't seem like she was moving. So, assuming that she had been alive for the last couple of days, but now she wasn't, they put her back in the grave and put her right back down. A graveyard worker was charged with the task of watching over her grave to make sure that if any other noises occurred throughout the night, they'd be able to pull her out. But sometime he decided that he didn't want to do that and he left to go to a local pub. However, she still hadn't died. She woke up in her coffin again. She scratched, she tore, she did everything she could, going into a full-blown panic about being put back in the ground. This time, when they went under to check her coffin to make sure that she had died, they found all the fresh scratches, all the fresh wounds from her trying to escape again, but this time, she had finally died. And that's why they started putting bells on gravesites.
I may have solved a murder. I'm gonna tell you about it while I take this off. Have you heard of the story of Kate Morgan? Kate was a member of a wealthy Iowa family. In her early 20s, she married a man named Thomas. This is important. The marriage was not a happy one. After 5 years of marriage, Kate ran off with another man named Alan. Then we lose record of Kate for a little while, until 1892 when she checks in at the Hotel Del Coronado. Strangely enough, she didn't check in under her own name. She checked in under the name Lottie A. Bernard. She was a quiet guest at the hotel, but took lots of baths. And back in those days, someone had to run a bath for you. She told the staff that she had stomach cancer and she was waiting for her brother who was a doctor. But no one came looking for her and no one sent her any letters. After a few days passed, she ventured out into the city to buy a gun. The next night, it started raining extremely hard. It was a storm. We actually investigated this hotel on our YouTube channel, and ironically, it was also storming that night, which honestly is unusual because it's California, it rarely storms. The next morning, her body was discovered laying out on the steps of the veranda. But it doesn't end there. Police were called and it was confirmed that she died of a gunshot wound. But the bullet found in her head did not fit the gun that she purchased. The case was reopened after that fact came to light. In over 100 years, it was never solved. It's been debated by many whether it was self-inflicted or a murder. Some people believe her spirit still resides at this hotel. And since I'm a professional ghost hunter, we decided to investigate. We stayed the night at the hotel and documented all of it. And now, after looking back at all of the footage, I think
this is why I don't tell anyone where I live. There was once a boy who asked his single father for a bedtime story, so the father told him. There was once a boy named Colby who made friends with another boy online called Helper23. On Colby's birthday, Helper23 wanted to give him a present in real life, so Colby gave him his home address, where he lives with his mom, his dad, and his little brother. But then Colby started to feel a bit weird about giving his address to a stranger online. The next night, he thought he had to tell his parents about it. He called out to his dad but got no reply, then found both his parents killed and a man wearing a dark hoodie holding a knife in the hallway. As Colby started to beg for his life, he hears his little brother crying in the next room. The intruder then strangles Colby and leaves the house with Colby's baby brother. The boy then looks up at his father and asks, "Why did the intruder take the baby?" To which his father just calmly smiled and said, "I've always wanted to be a father."
Let's talk about Jeff the Killer. By the way, this is a creepypasta. He was a 13-year-old boy who had just moved to a new town with his mother and father. And he was already being bullied a lot in horrible ways that I can't even say on this video. One day at a party, the bullying got a little too out of hand. They disfigured him, lighting him on fire and throwing bleach on his face. He woke up in the hospital with his head wrapped in bandages. His eyelids were burnt off. When he took off the bandages, he noticed his face was all leathery and pale. He started laughing uncontrollably, and doctors just played it off as, oh, maybe it's the medicine we gave him, making him a little loopy. He started saying he loved his new face, and he eventually carved a permanent smile in his mouth because mentally he was broken. He was no longer that nice little 13-year-old boy. That's when he decided to get revenge on the bullies, taking them out one by one. This watermelon's good. He even took his family's life. What did they do to you, bro? What did they do? Now it's stated that he comes after anyone who stays up late. This was the last photo someone took of him before he got them. This picture is supposedly cursed.